Before we begin, if you love philosophy, wisdom, and stories that awaken the soul, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Every video here is a journey into timeless truth, and perhaps this one will speak to you. Perhaps no one was hated as fiercely as the man who refused to lie. He never attacked. Yet the truth, by its very nature, burns those who live in falsehood, and when people cannot defeat your argument, they will try to silence your voice. That's what Athens did, and in doing so, they made him immortal. Socrates taught that virtues cannot be separated. You cannot be brave without justice. You cannot be kind without wisdom. You cannot be pious without understanding. Virtue, he said, is like a body. You cannot sever the heart from the lungs and still call it alive. True courage is not reckless boldness. It is intelligence guided by goodness. True goodness is not weakness. It is strength guided by wisdom. And thus, a virtuous person is not merely good, he is whole, aligned, and awake. Socrates mastered one rare art, the art of not pretending. He did not pretend to know what he didn't. He did not speak to be admired. He did not act to be loved. He simply lived the truth as he saw it. The Greeks called his style ironia, the word that gave birth to irony. To them, it meant feigned ignorance. But Socrates' ignorance was not feigned. It was sacred honesty. He truly believed he knew nothing, and that belief made him eternally curious. People accused him of trickery, but all he did was hold up a mirror until they saw their own contradictions. And in that moment of collapse, they began to rise toward genuine understanding. Do not imagine Socrates as cold or detached. He had a wife, Xanthippe, known for her temper, and 3 sons. When she scolded him in public, he only laughed. After thunder, there must come rain. He loved life, loved his friends. He even loved those who argued against him. For him, to debate was not to defeat, but to understand. He taught that reason without compassion is arrogance, and compassion without reason is blindness. True wisdom, he said, is when the mind illuminates the heart. The more we understand, the more we forgive. When you see why people err, you grow softer, not harder. Socrates was not merely a philosopher of the mind. He was a philosopher of a heart enlightened by reason. When Socrates drank the hemlock, the world stood still for a heartbeat. His friends wept, the guards lowered their eyes, and even his enemies felt something they could not name, the weight of an innocence too calm to condemn. He did not curse them. He did not plead. He simply spoke the same way he had always spoken, with reason, with humor, and with peace. And when the poison reached his heart, the last chains that tied him to fear broke. He had not only taught philosophy, he had lived it until his final breath. To Socrates, death was not a tragedy. It was a question answered, he said. To fear death is to think one knows what one does not. What if death is a dreamless sleep, a silence after the noise of the marketplace? Then why fear rest? Or what if it is a journey, a passage to another realm where the soul meets those who came before? Then why not go with curiosity instead of terror? For Socrates, every possibility of death led to only one truth. There is nothing to fear in what we do not know. Fear comes not from death itself, but from pretending we understand it. To live wisely, he said, is to walk with the unknown and still keep the heart steady. It is easy to speak about virtue, harder to live it when the crowd turns against you. Most men talk of justice until justice costs them comfort. Most men preach courage until courage costs them life. Socrates never separated his words from his being. He did not own ideas. He embodied them. He refused exile because running would mean denying everything he had ever taught. He refused despair because despair, too, is a form of ignorance, the belief that good can die. A philosopher, he said, should welcome death, as it is the final release of the soul from the body's confusion. And so he drank, not as a man defeated, but as a man completing his lesson. After his death, Athens fell into shame. The city that had prided itself on wisdom realized it had silenced its wisest voice. Within a few years, the men who voted to execute him regretted it publicly. Statues were raised, apologies were made, but none of it could bring back the man who had loved them enough to tell them the truth. Athens had built temples for its gods, but none for self-knowledge. And when a man came holding a mirror to their souls, they shattered it. Yet fragments of that mirror spread across the world, and every philosopher since has picked up one piece, trying to see himself reflected there. From the ruins of that trial rose an idea that would never die. The mind must govern life. Plato built an academy to preserve it. Aristotle carried it to science. Zeno shaped it into stoicism, a way of living in harmony with reason and nature. Centuries later, Epictetus, a slave, found freedom in the same words. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor, ruled with the same calm. Both, in their own ways, were disciples of the man who owned nothing but wisdom. Every time a human being chooses integrity over advantage, truth over popularity, and peace over fear, the voice of Socrates speaks again. Socrates started no war, raised no army, founded no state, yet he began the most radical revolution of all, the revolution of the inner life. He turned philosophy from the stars to the soul. He made wisdom walk barefoot through the marketplace. He made thinking a moral duty. The world had seen conquerors who changed borders. He changed consciousness, because once a person learns to question himself, no tyrant, no dogma, no fear can ever fully rule him again. Know thyself, the oracle had said. But to truly know yourself is not comfortable. It means stripping away illusions, standing naked before the truth, and admitting that the greatest battles are fought within. Most people would rather worship gods than question their own motives. They would rather obey than understand. They would rather condemn others than confront their own contradictions. Socrates chose the harder path, the slow, painful liberation that begins when you dare to look inward. For Socrates, freedom was not doing whatever one wishes. Freedom was the mastery of self. He is free, he said, who can control his desires, not he who satisfies them. A man who must drink, who must be praised, who must win, is still a slave. But the man who can choose peace over impulse is already a king. His chains are not of iron, but of ignorance. Break those, and you need no revolution. I know that I know nothing. Those 7 words changed civilization. They turned arrogance into curiosity. They transformed philosophy into dialogue. They invited humanity to grow by doubting itself. Ignorance with awareness is wisdom's beginning. Ignorance without awareness is folly's prison. The moment you admit you might be wrong, you open the door through which truth can enter. More than 2 millennia have passed, yet the image remains. A man sitting calmly with a cup of poison, surrounded by tears, teaching until the end. The light in that prison cell has never gone out. It has burned through generations, in every thinker who asked, in every artist who questioned, in every ordinary person who refused to lie. Socrates lives in every honest conversation, in every moment when a person pauses before speaking and asks, "Is it true?" The legacy of Socrates is not in words carved on stone, but in the courage to keep asking questions. To question the world is easy. To question oneself, that is sacred. He taught that to live truthfully is to live dangerously, because truth always threatens illusion. He taught that to live awake is to see through the fog of habit, and to act not from fear, but from understanding. He taught that to live free is to belong to nothing but the good. And perhaps that is why, after thousands of years, his voice still echoes quietly beneath all noise, saying, "Do not be content with opinions. Seek understanding. Do not chase pleasure. Cultivate virtue. Do not fear death. Fear only never having lived truly." In the end, philosophy did not begin with an answer. It began with a man who asked. And that question continues. Every classroom that values thought, every religion that values conscience, every mind that values truth, owes a debt to that barefoot man in the streets of Athens. Because of him, we learned that thinking is a form of love. Love for truth, love for humanity, love for the mysterious beauty of being alive. If you listen closely, you can still hear his footsteps echoing through the centuries, not in temples, not in courts, but in the quiet moments when a person asks himself, "Am I living as I ought?" That silence between the question and the answer is where philosophy begins. It is where Socrates still lives. Athens, 2.5 millennia ago, the marble streets glimmer under the Mediterranean sun. Merchants call out prices, poets argue over verses, and soldiers boast of victories in distant wars. Among them walks an old man, barefoot, plain-clothed, his eyes bright, yet strangely calm. He stops anyone, anywhere, generals, artisans, priests, boys running errands, and asks questions, not about money or fame or politics, but about the soul, about virtue, about what it truly means to live well. His name is Socrates, and though he owns nothing, he carries the most dangerous weapon in the world, a question. An unexamined life, he would one day say, is not worth living. Socrates was not born into power. His father, Sophronius, was a stonemason. His mother, Phaenarete, a midwife. Perhaps that is why Socrates would later call himself a midwife of the mind, helping others give birth to ideas rather than to children. As a young man, he fought bravely as a hoplite soldier in the wars of Athens. He endured hunger, cold, and wounds without complaint. But the greatest battle he would ever fight was not on any battlefield. It was inside the human mind. It began with a riddle. A friend once visited the Oracle of Delphi and asked, "Is anyone wiser than Socrates?" The oracle replied, "No one is wiser." Socrates was puzzled. How can that be? He thought. I know nothing. So he set out to prove the oracle wrong. He questioned politicians who claimed to be wise, but found they spoke in circles. He challenged poets who wrote beautifully, but could not explain their own verses. He debated craftsmen who knew their trade, yet thought their skill made them wise in everything. At last Socrates understood. His wisdom was knowing that he knew nothing, and from that moment his mission was born, to awaken people from the illusion of knowledge. Imagine being stopped in the marketplace by this odd, relentless man. He asks, "What is courage?" You answer, "To stand firm in battle." He smiles gently. "Then are wild beasts courageous too?" They charge without fear. You hesitate. He asks again, "So courage is not mere fearlessness, but knowing what to fear and what not to. Then tell me what is wisdom?" Within minutes, your confidence crumbles. You realize you do not understand the very thing you thought you mastered. This is the Socratic method, the art of dismantling false certainty. It is not humiliation, it is liberation. For only when ignorance is exposed can truth be born. Athens adored eloquence. It worshipped beauty, victory, and pride. But Socrates was a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable things. He exposed corruption in politicians, vanity in scholars, hypocrisy in priests. He walked through the marketplace not as a teacher, but as a gadfly, stinging the city so it would not fall asleep. He never charged money. He never claimed authority. He only questioned and forced others to think. To the young, he was a revelation. To the powerful, he was a nuisance. And to the insecure, he was a threat. Years passed. Athens grew weary of the man who made it question itself. In 399 BC, 3 citizens, Meletus, Anytus, and Lycon, brought charges against him. Socrates corrupts the youth, and he does not believe in the gods of the city. The irony was bitter. The man who urged others toward virtue was now accused of destroying it. When the trial began, the court was packed. Hundreds of citizens sat as jurors, whispering, laughing, judging. Socrates stood alone, calm as always. He did not flatter, plead, or beg. He simply spoke. I know my reputation. They say I am a corrupter of youth, but I tell you, I only awaken them. The unexamined life is not worth living. He compared himself to a gadfly sent by the gods to keep Athens awake. Without me, he said, the city would sleep in its complacency. But Athens wanted sleep. When the votes were counted, he was found guilty. And for his punishment, he was to drink poison and die. Socrates' friends begged him to flee. They bribed guards, planned escape routes. He refused. Would I run from the very laws I have lived by? He asked. A philosopher does not fear death. He fears ignorance. In his final hours, he spoke of the soul, how it is immortal, how death is not an end, but a transition. When the jailer brought the cup of hemlock, he drank it without trembling. His last words were strange and serene. Credo, we owe a cock to Asclepius. The god Asclepius was the god of healing. To Socrates, death itself was a cure, a release from ignorance into pure truth. When he died, Athens fell silent. It had killed its conscience. But ideas are harder to kill than men. Plato, his student, gathered his words, turning conversations into dialogues that shaped philosophy for all time. From them came Aristotle, the Stoics, the skeptics, a lineage of thinkers stretching from ancient Greece to every mind that ever asked, what is good? Socrates' life was not about answers. It was about the courage to question. He believed that truth is not given. It is earned through struggle. That virtue is not taught. It is practiced through reflection. And that freedom begins not in politics, but in self-knowledge. Know thyself, he said. For when you know yourself, you will not be carried away by the crowd. He was the first man to turn philosophy inward, from the stars and gods to the soul and conscience. He took the divine down from Olympus and placed it within the human heart. And perhaps that is why he frightened people, because he made them see that the gods they feared were not out there, but in here. To say, I know nothing, was not humility. It was revelation. Because once you admit you know nothing, the universe opens. Ignorance can be cured by curiosity. Arrogance cannot. And in that simple truth lies the seed of all progress. Every scientist, every artist, every dreamer who ever changed the world, they all began like Socrates, with a question, what if? Why not? Could there be another way? Socrates taught us that doubt is not the enemy of faith. It is the beginning of understanding. In every age, there are those who worship certainty. They build systems, rules, and dogmas, and then chain others to them. Socrates was their opposite. He was the rebel who shattered every false idol of the mind. He replaced doctrine with dialogue, obedience with observation, conformity with conscience. He did not lead armies, yet his revolution outlived empires. He fought not with weapons, but with words, and won immortality. When his last breath faded, many believed philosophy had died with him. But soon after, his students, Plato, Xenophon, Antisthenes, began to write, to teach, to remember. And they said, Socrates still lives. Not in temples or statues, but in every question without an easy answer. For every time a human being asks, what is right? What is wrong? Why do I live? The spirit of Socrates whispers through time. Examine yourself. Socrates didn't just teach people how to think. He taught them how to look inward. To him, the soul was the core of existence. The body fades, wealth disappears, fame dissolves, but the soul, if nourished by truth and virtue, becomes eternal. The soul, he said, is the most precious thing we possess. Whoever tends to it need not fear loss. He saw life as a vast classroom where every hardship is a lesson in character. When insulted, he practiced patience. When betrayed, he practiced forgiveness. When condemned, he practiced peace. And finally, when facing death, he practiced freedom, the freedom from fear. Someone once asked him, "Socrates, are you not afraid they'll kill you?" He smiled. "A good man cannot be harmed. They may kill my body, but they cannot touch my soul." For him, virtue was the only weapon that could never be taken away. No one can rob you of your integrity unless you surrender it. The true evil, he said, is not in being wronged, but in becoming unjust yourself. For the one who commits evil wounds his own spirit, while the innocent, though condemned, remains whole. One afternoon, a young man asked him, "Master, what is virtue?" Socrates did not answer. Instead, he asked, "Do you believe a man who knows what is right could willingly do wrong?" The student said, "No." Socrates smiled. "Then knowledge is the root of virtue. People do evil not because they wish to, but because they do not know they are doing evil." He believed that true knowledge and virtue are one and the same. To understand goodness is to live it, because real understanding is not cold intellect. It's a living awareness that guides action. No one, he said, can deliberately act against what they truly know to be right. If they do, they never knew it at all. From Socrates sprang two great rivers of thought, Stoicism and skepticism. Different in name, yet both flowing from the same spring, self-mastery, humility, and the courage to question oneself. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, once said, "A wise man is free even in chains." Those words are the echo of Socrates, the freest man inside a prison cell, and the skeptics, like Arcesilaus, inherited his spirit of inquiry. There is no absolute truth, only the endless journey toward it. And so, philosophy became a river that never stops flowing, and at its source always stands Socrates. Socrates never wrote a book. He founded no empire. He left no school of marble. He left a way of being. He lived simply, ate little, slept little, and owned almost nothing. But he owned himself. "The fewer your needs," he said, "the nearer you are to the gods." His stillness was not weakness. It was power refined. In a city obsessed with display, he refused to perform. In a world that worshipped victory, he stopped competing because he understood the greatest victory is to conquer oneself. But not everyone could bear his mirror. The rich despised him for mocking wealth. The powerful despised him for fearing no one. The proud despised him because he exposed their ignorance.